Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So you'll have seen we've picked up a new car, and this one's for Mrs. GB. It's her new daily, and in particular what I want to look at today is replacing these aged screens here. Now the screens themselves aren't too bad. It's the GUI, or the graphics user interface on them. They just aged the vehicle so much. Let me show you what I mean. Now, to start with, you could count the pixels just with your naked eye, but when you start navigating around the system, you can very quickly begin to see just how dated it is. It's just old, and I don't like it. I prefer the user interface in the newer system, not the Pivi Pro. I mean, that is lovely, but that's not in any of the cars I've got. But we can do a lot better here. Let me show you what I've got in mind. I've picked up these two screens, and what they're designed to do is very closely mirror what's in here in this car. It's very similar to the the dual screen setup, and it's a much bigger screen with a more modern interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to rip the dashboard to pieces and we're going to get them fitted. So let's give it a go. To start with, I need to remove these two panels here. I've got a little trim tool that came in the box with a screen. I then need to take off this panel off the end here, and also the steering wheel shroud here, which then exposes a couple of bolts here, and I think there's maybe one on the end here as well, a couple there, one there, and then this whole thing should peel off with the screen part of it, and then from behind you can remove the screen. So cue time lapse, probably going to be some cheesy music over that as well. Let's get a time lapse of this coming out, hopefully it'll be a bit quicker than real life, and we'll see how it goes. Too bad. A few bolts, a couple on the end, a couple down here. The most fiddly bit was getting this binnacle off around the speedo there, just exposing all of that. Word of caution, there is a bolt hiding in here, and there's a locating lug that you have to unclip from, and then again just another bolt in here. So dead simple. When you start pulling it forward, you have to unclip this off the back of the screen there, and you're left with this. So now what I need to do is look at taking these trims off to expose this unit down to this brake line here. That's going to replace with that lower screen. I can then take this out and start bolting stuff in and putting it back together. So cue another time lapse while I put myself back through YouTube University to understand this, how these come off, and we'll get everything out. It looks like a bomb's gone off in here. Let me show you where I've got to. It's all in pieces. I've had to take out the entire centre console. That's the correct way of doing it. That's the back of the unit there. And we've got access to the screen. So what I need to do now is take this screen out, take that unit out, remount the new ones, and then start looking at the wiring. So let's turn our attention to that big bar that went along there and change this screen out. So that's the screen out. I believe these are fibre optic connectors or coaxial. They're a bit funky, whatever they are. Maybe fibre optic. But anyway, now I need to go and take this screen, make sure this roughly correlates with what I've got on the other one, and see where we end up.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Right, I think I've made some progress. I've figured out this end. I just need to figure out how all of this now interfaces into here. Cue another time lapse of me looking quite baffled whilst I get this in and test it before I then mount this to the back of that trim panel that goes along there. So let's do a test and see if we can get that working. Now what you're watching here is me realising something isn't quite right and consulting the manual. And that thing that isn't quite right is some missing plugs in the back of the unit. And what you need to do is you need to remove the circuit board from your existing screen and move it over to the new unit, because that has all of the settings saved from your car, which wouldn't come with the new screen. Right, we're back, and that turned into far more of a kerfuffle than I initially thought it would. We've had to totally strip the gubbins out of the existing unit, and we've had to put them inside of here. I did think it was a bit odd because none of these plugs are transposed, and there's a good reason for that. They needed to come out of there. So I've had to disconnect ribbon cables, all kinds of things that I've never done before, finding out new stuff, but it's all in. So let's go back in the front and let's see if we can get it all in and working. Perfect, that works. Bit of jiggery pokery, had to take the CD player out to put the piggyback loom in, but once that was out, it was all plug and play, and here we are, we're ready to go. So before I mess around with this too much, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this mounted to that bar there. I'm going to get in my new aircon controls and we can start piecing everything back together. And there we have it in its new home. So I can now move on to this. That was dead easy. I don't know why they haven't made a similar solution for the F-Type. That you have to have programmed in with JLR software, whereas that was just dead simple, plug and play. All right, you do get the Android interface, it's not fully OEM, but crikey, for the price difference, I think that was about £200 to have it put in the F-Type around there. It was about £1,000 to have that upgraded, and you have to have the correct tools. You can't just do it yourself. Right, onwards and upwards, let's get this in. Dead easy. A few bolts to remove those silver side trims, a couple of bolts on the back here, unplug the harness, and that's out. So another time lapse, let's get that in. There is a little adapter harness back here, so we'll piggyback that in somehow. I'm guessing that goes onto there, looking at it. Another time lapse, let's get that in and we can start putting everything back together, because the car at the moment is looking very sorry for itself. So let's get that back together, and then I'm not going to be in trouble with Mrs. GB, because she can't get to work because I've taken her car to pieces. So let's get it back together, get myself out of the doghouse and get a functional car. There we have it, the new screen's in. Looks a lot more modern than the original one. Now, initial feeling is, I don't know how I feel about this gloss black against the grey. I think it could be alright because you've got gloss black elsewhere, especially in here when it's all back together. But I'm going to reserve judgment until it's all put back together. So let's get in the car and let's put it back together. And then power everything on, make sure it works. Now this is all pretty simple. It's just a reversal of how we took it out. Bolting everything back together and testing it as you go along to make sure you don't have to take anything apart at the end to put it right. What you're watching is me trying to work out why the reversing cameras aren't working, and if you have that problem, it's just a simple case of reversing that ribbon cable. I had it 180 degrees the wrong way. I think it actually looks really smart. Now, unlike the screen we put in the F-Type, this isn't a genuine JLR product. It's an aftermarket Android piece of kit. So it does have some drawbacks, and am I 100% satisfied with it? No. Let me talk you through it. The user interface is very akin to that comes as standard in the JLR products, not the new Pivi Pro, but the original. I think they call it Touch Duo with the two screens, and you can still access the original vehicle menu all in here. You can get to everything. It all looks very, very similar. The only difference being you've got touch buttons rather than physical buttons. But it's all there, it all works. You get all the original surround cameras and everything, and you can expand upon them if you use the screen properly. There we go. So you can still do all that good stuff. It's all still there. You retain the original functionality, but on top of that, you then get the updated user interface and of course the Apple CarPlay. Now the screen down here is the bit that sort of I'm not 100% happy with. In the UK, you have to have a physical button for your hazard lights, and you think, oh, okay, you know, that's pretty easy. There's a button there, let's push that. No, this is weird. You push the volume button for the hazard lights, and that's just, it's a bit weird. If you know, if you didn't know this car, if you didn't know that quirk, you wouldn't at all think that would be the thing, and you run the risk of, when you're changing the volume, whacking the hazard light. So that for me is a bit of a detractor. The second thing, the seats, they all work. You can heat them perfectly as you normally would. You turn the dial, there you go, so you can turn your seats on and off there as you. This car does not have cooled seats yet. That's not something you can turn off in the settings menu. So again, bit strange, but everything else works as it should. Everything, all the buttons, the climate, you can sync, you can change temperatures, sync that so they're both the same. They'll. Ooh, okay, I found a new thing. What's that? It's because this is expecting a left-hand drive car, so when you adjust the passenger, even though you're synced, there you go, it turns off. So again, another downfall. This is expecting a left-hand drive car, and I don't believe, no, you can't, you can't change that in the settings. So yeah, bit of a strange one. So am I 100% happy with it? No, I think those quirks on the climate screen are probably, in my opinion, they're a little bit too much. I wouldn't be happy with that, but it's not my car, it's Mrs. GB. We'll let her make the decision. Ultimately, it does bring it into the 21st century. It makes it look a lot more modern. I know this car was made in the 21st century, but you understand where I'm going. It does refresh the interior and bring it into, you know, much more modern look. I'll leave it up to Mrs. GB if she's happy with that. If not, we can try and find an alternative version of this or default back to the standard. This is really smart. I'm pleased with that. And the both of them cost me a shade over £300, so it's not a huge investment. Yes, £300 is a chunk of change to be dropping on the new screen for your car, but it's not like we've gone out and spent £1,600–1,700 like it would have been doing two screens in the F-Type, so that's quite good. So I'll leave it up to Mrs. GB, see how she gets on with these. If she's happy with it, fine. If not, we'll pivot and we'll try and find something else. But anyway, I hope it's useful for you guys. I wanted to do this just to update the car for my wife, but also to give you an idea on how these things work and show you the pros and cons of each before you go and invest yourselves. But if you're not already, please do drop a sub to the channel by hitting that link down below. Stick around for more content, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. To start with, you could count the pixels. Oh, why are you beeping at me? Let's get rid of that. There we go. Now to start with, you could pound, this really isn't going well. Let's start again. Now, to start with, you could count the pixels.